Rex time. Welcome to the podcast known as Rex Time. I'm Rex Perez, aka Professor Rex. This is episode 002, which is technically the third episode because for some mathematical reason I thought it'd be cool to start numbering the podcasts at 000. Math nerd, bad idea. Okay, first things first. What are we going to talk about this episode? We are going to talk about how to get some cool Arby's merchandise like this shirt. We're going to talk about my thoughts on the movie Wicked and how to keep your hair dark naturally, maybe, I'm not sure. And also we're going to talk about American Psycho, the book, the movie, and the new movie coming out, and so many other things. First idea is you watch a lot of these podcasts. How much time do they put into prep? So I wrote down like 20 ideas, and that took me like an hour, and now this is going to take 20 minutes, so I'm not sure how much time people put into their podcasts. Like, for example, like the Tim Dillon podcast, he basically shouts for about an hour. Like, how much prep does he put in? And he's got a lot of jokes in there, so I'm very curious as to how much prep goes into one of his podcasts. Okay, so Rex time. Let's begin. This cool shirt. It says meats. We have the meats. Arby's. So a couple years ago, I emailed. So here, write this down. Maybe I could add it in and post. I don't know how to add things in yet, but that'd be cool if I did. So I emailed customer service at Arby's.com. Customer service at Arby's.com. And I said, hey, I'm a big fan of your sandwiches. Can you please hook me up with a trucker cap? And then I signed my name and put my mailing address. And a few weeks later, this t-shirt showed up in the mail. It's not the trucker hat that I wanted, but this shirt is super cool. And people always ask me how I got this. So try it out. Customer service at Arby's.com. And I was looking at the shirt and I just remembered, you see the little, you see the logo right there, the Arby's logo, that thing? When I was younger, I thought it was an oven mitt. I thought it was like a hamburger helper oven mitt, but it's a cowboy hat. Who knew? Another logo that I always got confused with as a kid. Actually, I just realized it recently. The Goodyear logo. If I was cool, I could maybe just put it into this video. I don't know how. I probably should have printed it out. But the Goodyear logo, it's like a foot and it has a sandal on it. So it's a sandaled foot with wings, or a wing. Kind of like, who was that? The Messenger of the Gods foot. And if you look at it really quickly, what I always saw was a hand and a finger pointing. So it looked like that to me. It just looks like a hand and a finger pointing. But that's really just the toe. Oh no, that's the wing. That's the tip of the wing. Yeah, give it a look. See if you see what I'm saying. So the Goodyear logo is a winged sandal on a foot. And it looks like a finger pointing to me. But I was young. Crazy. I see it now, but I still kind of, if I glance at it, I'm like, it does look like a pointing finger. Okay. So logos that I don't see very well. So Arby's and that. Okay, so we talked about the Arby's. Arby's. While we're speaking of Arby's, people told me when I was younger that Arby's, it got its name Arby's because of the letter R and the letter B, RB. And that it actually stood for roast beef, like their sandwiches, Arby's, roast beefs. But it turns out that, yes, the Arby's did get its name from the letter R and the letter B to be Arby's, but it actually stands for, I'm looking at my notes here, Raffle, R-A-F-F-E-L, Raffle Brothers, R-B, Raffle Brothers. Leroy and Forrest Raffle. Aha. I'm looking at my hair in the image right now. Look like an owl. Kind of weird. Got these two little ears. Speaking of owls, randomly, owls are super cool birds. They, you probably never even actually seen an owl in real life flying because they're nocturnal. And owls are so super quiet and silent that scientists actually study them. Turns out they have like their feather density is like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 times higher than most other birds. Like most other birds, you can hear them flapping their wings, but owls are not perfectly silent, but very near silent. And what they have is tons of feathers, and they're all super soft and fluffy. And so that's why owls can just swoop in at night and just grab the prey and no one hears them coming. And then when they do that, so let's say they grab like a little mouse or a rabbit or something, they will eat up that animal. And then, so imagine they kind of just chew it up and swallow the whole thing, but the body can't really process like the fur and the bones and all that weird stuff. So what the owl does is once it's the stomach sort of taking all the nutrients out, all that weird stuff like the fur and the bones, it kind of compacts it into like a little sort of, they call it an owl pellet, and it just kind of throws it up. And so if there's an owl, that's how you find an owl nest. You'll find these weird little furry sort of pellets on the ground. They're called owl pellets, and that's how you know, oh, there must be an owl nest way up in the top of that tree. So that's something interesting about owls. Randomly brought that up because I don't know, I got those two little, looks like owl ears going on right now. Oh well. Let's see. Oh, hot take. My first hot take is Indian food. Indian food is amazing, and I'm not sure why it's not super popular in America yet. So we have Panda Express, right? So sort of a nationwide chain of quick, cheap Chinese food. Everyone loves it. Everyone loves Panda Express. Okay. It's just a matter of time before everyone falls in love with Indian food. Chicken tikka masala, spinach chicken, curry potatoes, naan bread. Like, it's delicious. And I don't think it's going to be that expensive. It's probably going to be like the same price point as a Panda Express. So I was thinking about this. I'm like, okay, it's inevitable. I wonder what it's going to be called, right? Like, I wouldn't have expected a nationwide Chinese food restaurant to be called Panda Express, but it works, right? So I used to go to this one Indian restaurant down the street from my house. It was called Hurry Curry. Kind of a good name. Sounds a little bit too much like hare kare, which is like, I think, Japanese for suicide, something like that, or like sort of a noble self-killing. So I don't know if Hurry Curry particularly works, but I was thinking of different names that might work. So if we take sort of the formula for Panda Express, the panda represents China. So what animal would represent India? And you might say like, oh, the elephant, but elephant, that's 3 syllables, so that doesn't really work so well. So maybe the tiger, and you're like, okay, Panda Express, tiger, like what would be good? And I was like, tiger belly. I'm like, oh, but that's Bobby Lee's podcast. But what a wonderful name for Indian food. So maybe one day some Indian food corporation will buy the name Tiger Belly from him. Just a thought, but it does not sound good. Oh, what are you in the mood for? I don't know, let's go get some Tiger Belly. Oh yeah, that sounds good, you know. Love spinach chicken. So yeah, Tiger Belly would be a great name for Indian food. Oh, last time we were talking about some, I just have random notes here. I have 20 ideas. Let's see if we can get through all of them. We're talking about superstitions from my Indonesian grandmother. I think one of them last time was like, if your left hand is itching, that means money is coming your way. So another one, I don't know if it's a superstition. Well, did I mention that if a bird poops on you, that means good luck? So if a bird poops on you, that's good luck. The color purple, that's good luck. Many superstitions. Oh, if you hear crickets at night, good luck. Many things are good luck. And then I don't know if this one's superstition. It's just something she always said. She said coconut oil. If you wash like a baby's hair with coconut oil, it'll make the hair go dark. So kind of as a joke, but not really as a joke, I kind of went with that. So I have been using this stuff. See how it's got coconut oil? It's sort of a conditioner. So I don't know. It's not too gray. Okay, so that's my little joke to myself and like my family, that I use this to try and keep my hair dark. Speaking of conditioner, so I use that coconut conditioner, and I've been practicing something called co-washing. Now don't judge me. Don't be judgy. Co-washing is where you don't really use shampoo, you just use conditioner. I know it sounds like I'm a dirty birdie, but I'm not. Your hair still gets, my hair's not too long, seems fine. because someone had pointed out one time, I think it was a stand-up comedian I saw one time, they said, hey, you ever notice how homeless people or the unhoused are never bald? And they said, it's probably because they don't uh, over clean their hair or something along those lines. And I was like, huh, that's an interesting theory. So that led me to what is called co-washing my hair, conditioner washing. So every other week I'll use shampoo, but for the most part, I'm just using conditioner, co-washing with my uh, coconut oil, because coconut oil makes your hair turn dark. Thanks, Grandma. Okay, let's see what else we got going on. Oh, okay. Before we get into Wicked, let me talk a little bit about originality, the concept of originality. So growing up, one of the things that was emphasized in my family by my mom and dad, or mostly my mom, is be original. Don't be a copycat. So someone might do something that someone else did, something derivative, and amongst the kids or something. She's like, oh, do your own thing. Don't be a copycat. Don't be a copycat. So I really got that embedded in my head of like, it has to be completely original. So in 7th grade, I was giving we had to give a speech. Everyone had to give a speech. So I did a speech on bananas. I remember just picking something super ordinary, mundane, just so that it'd be, it was so mundane that it'd be funny. So I did a speech on bananas. And in that speech, I pulled out a Wheatie box, Wheaties, remember the cereal, the orange box where they have famous people on the cover? So I had a Wheaties box, and the person on the Wheaties box, I can't remember who it was some famous person, but I had cut out my face and put it on top of that person. So I was on the cover of the Wheaties box for my speech in 7th grade. And in addition to that, I had a poster that accompanied that of some guy surfing a big wave. He's like in the barrel. And again, I cut out my face and put it onto that picture. And of course, the speech was a huge success. Everyone was laughing. It was great. The teacher was impressed. Like, the teacher told other teachers about it. Quite the hit. Next class, everyone starts cutting their face out and putting it onto things. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a bunch of copycats. And yet, the whole class was still erupting in laughter. I'm like, wait. What are you folks doing? Like, this is unoriginal. This is a copycat. Like, why would you even laugh at this? So it took me, I still don't think I've learned it, that no one really cares about originality. You could just steal whatever. There's no points for being original. Very few people appreciate originality. I'm one of them. Okay, so there's this whole concept in my mind of originality. So let's get to Wicked. So Wicked is the prequel to The Wizard of Oz, which is fine. So it's a derivative work. You're basically taking all these characters that exist. Okay, so that's not very original, but I'm okay with that. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to take this different sort of angle where I'm going to let you see how the Wicked Witch of the West was actually not the bad guy. Turns out just the opposite is true. Okay, that sounds super interesting. I can't wait to see this. Okay. So it turns out it's a musical. Not a big fan of that. We'll talk more about that in a second, but that's fine. Oh, by the way, this section right here is probably going to be unpopular. Okay, I tried singing. I suck. Okay. So the good witch, Gilda. Okay, so the Munchkins are singing. They're all happy that the witch is dead. And they're like, didn't you know her? And Gilda's like, yeah, actually I did know her, back in the day. And then she starts to tell the story of how she knew the Wicked Witch of the West. And so it's like, oh, is it going to be Gilda's perspective? But then it quickly just cuts to the story of the Wicked Witch of the West. So Gilda's perspective sort of just magically disappears. Okay, that's fine. So then we have the Wicked Witch of the West. And so it's from her perspective now. That's fine. And she's like a little girl. And does no one bathe her? Do we not figure out that water is going to kill her? Like, that all avoided. Except this one random scene when she goes away to school with her sister and the headmaster lady. It starts to rain and she pulls out an umbrella. So they address the whole water situation in like 30 seconds. It's like, oh, stay out of the water. And she puts up the umbrella, stay out of the water. Okay. And that was it. So that was addressing her Achilles heel, that water apparently melts her. So her family never bathed her. She never went swimming. I don't know. A little weird. Okay. So we have this prequel. And here's how I would like a prequel to be. Okay. Quick tangent. Okay. We're going to come back to Wicked, but let's talk about how I think a prequel should be. So the prequel to Star Wars Episode 4, the original Star Wars that came out in like 1977 or something like that, the prequel to that was called Rogue One. Okay, so remember how Star Wars Episode 4, the original Star Wars, how it started out. So they have the Rebels, they have that little sort of tiny ship with like 8 exhaust pipes, and it's running away from the big triangular, the gigantic triangle Darth Vader ship. And then eventually the Darth Vader ship captures it, okay? And they're like, oh my God, we got captured. And then there's that iconic scene like near the very beginning where all the rebels are in the hallway holding their guns, and then the doors blast open and the stormtroopers come in. And then, there's a little battle, all these rebels die, and then Darth Vader comes out. Wong, 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 right? Okay, amazing, iconic. So how does Rogue One end? Rogue One ends, so the prequel to Star Wars is Rogue One. It ends as that ship that got caught, they're kind of battling with Vader, and they escape. Okay, so they escape and Rogue One ends. Oh, so I was hoping, when I was watching Rogue One, I'm like, oh my God, they're getting to that opening scene of Star Wars. How cool is it going to be if Rogue One ends, so that last like minute or so remember in Episode 4 where Darth Vader finally makes his entrance. So where Darth Vader makes his entrance in the original Star Wars, that's where I wanted Rogue One to end. In other words, you would have, here's Star Wars Episode 4, and Rogue One would overlap it by like 30 seconds to a minute. So there's just that last 30 seconds of Rogue One would be from Darth Vader's perspective before he boards the ship of the rebels to go try and find Princess Leia. Oh my God, that would have been so awesome. But instead, it was a gap. It's like, oh, they just escaped. Okay, so then were they chasing them for a few hours, a few days? So there's that gap. Okay, I kind of understand. It might have been complicated to try and make it line up perfectly. I wanted. Is this even making sense to anyone? I see it so perfectly. Basically, to reiterate, how Rogue One should have ended in my mind was where it stops, right where we first see Darth Vader in the original Star Wars. So it's perfect continuity with 30 seconds of overlap. That last 30 seconds is from Darth Vader's perspective. Genius. That's how it should have went. They didn't do that. They sort of separated it. The rebels escape, and then I don't know what happens, and then they catch them in Star Wars. Okay, no one followed that except maybe some Star Wars nerds. Okay, so getting back to Wicked. So Wicked, it ends. So the prequel, I want the prequel to line up and be continuous. Here's how Wicked should have ended. It should have ended with a house falling on that girl, on the sister. That's how Wicked should have ended. Instead, it ends, so that would have been perfect continuity with the 30-second overlap. That would have been perfect in my mind. I don't even understand that it was like, I don't know, 5 years between them. It says to be continued, so you're going to need like what, Wicked 2, Wicked 3, Wicked 4? Because Wicked leaves off when the Wicked Witch basically figures out that everyone's a jerk. It's like, oh my gosh, I need to get out of here. You guys are all insane. And then, she uses the spell book and the monkeys get their wings, but we don't know. There's no establishing her having her own castle. It's just, it's frustrating because I wanted the prequel should perfectly explain the original movie. That's what I want. That did not happen. Okay. Ramble. I don't know if anyone's making sense of this. What else do I got? Oh, so a thing about musicals. So in movies and screenwriting, there's a concept where every scene should go from positive to negative, where basically a scene starts with someone's happy and then something happens, they become angry, or they're angry, they become happy. Something should happen. There should be an emotional change in each scene. That's what makes a movie interesting. Okay, in musicals, once they start singing, the singing parts, I realize, very rarely have an emotional change. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm sad. Okay, and now I start singing about how I'm sad for 3 minutes. So over that 3 minutes while they're singing, there's no emotional change. Or, oh my God, something cool happened. Now I'm happy. Okay, now I sing for 3 minutes about how happy I am. But while they're singing, nothing interesting is happening. So I think for those of us that aren't really into the singing aspect, just from a sort of film perspective, it's kind of slow. And I think that's the problem with, to just bring it to another film, Joker 2. So Joker 2, a lot of singing, and you're just like, okay, nothing's really happening. Okay, you're upset. Okay, so you sing about it for 3 minutes. Oh, you're happy. Okay. So singing and film, I don't know, leave the singing on Broadway, perhaps. That might be my suggestion. Another thought about Joker 2. I don't know if I talked about this in the previous podcast. I can't remember. So when I was watching it, I had just watched an interview with Quentin Tarantino discussing it. And Quentin Tarantino loved it. He thought it was genius because it was the ultimate joke by the Joker. And so knowing that he loved it and that in mind, I watched it, and I'm going to have to disagree with Quentin Tarantino. I don't like films where everything is a fantasy sequence. So did anything even happen? I just spent 2 hours watching this movie and it was all a fantasy sequence? Like, wait, what was the point of that? I don't know. I want things to actually happen. I don't want fantasy sequences. Okay. What else we got going on here? That. Okay. Oh, so we're sticking with this whole idea of unoriginal, not unoriginal, but like prequels. Let's go to prequels. So also in Wicked, we had the switched perspective. So instead of, I guess it wasn't, I guess the Wicked Oz didn't really have a perspective. I guess it was Dorothy's perspective. Ignore all that. Okay, so there's this new book. It came out, I think, last year. It's called James, and it won tons of awards. It did not get the Pulitzer, but it won a bunch of other literary awards. So James is the story. Remember Huckleberry Finn that you had to read in high school or pretended to read like I did? So imagine that book, instead of being told from Huckleberry Finn's perspective, it's told from Slave Jim's perspective. Oh, okay, so that's interesting. So that's the book called James. So again, it kind of bugs me because it's not an original idea. All you're doing is, hey, we have these established characters. Let's just, latch onto those and just write the same story but from a different perspective. Okay, cool. Well, the book's really good, unoriginal aside. So it was interesting to get an interesting new perspective on it. But I think in my mind, they got a little bit too creative with it. So the whole concept of James is that Slave Jim is actually an autodidact. That's like he taught himself how to read and he became super intelligent. So he would sneak into Judge Thatcher's office and just read all the books. And there's like some philosophy books, and he's an extreme intellectual. And so oftentimes in the book, Jim would just sort of have these sort of fantasy sequences where he's arguing with himself. Well, he's not arguing with himself. I guess he's with himself. He's having these imaginary arguments with like Rousseau or Locke, or Voltaire, these other philosophers. And the part I did enjoy was, so he's super hyper educated, Jim, but he plays it up in front of white people where he just pretends to not be intelligent at all so that they don't catch on to it. And every once in a while he slips up and they're like, wait, what? He's like, oh, nothing. So that's pretty fun. What else in there? Oh, so yeah, that book was pretty good. And then it was actually so good. I recommend it. It was really good. But what was interesting was that I was like, oh my gosh, that was so good. Now I want to actually read the original Huckleberry Finn, because like I was saying before, we were technically supposed to read it in high school, but I didn't. I just kind of sat there and pretended I did. So, and by read, I mean listen on audiobook. So I listened on audiobook and it was so good. So you have these scenes, like you need to hopefully maybe read Huckleberry Finn first, then James. That might make more sense. I did it backwards because you're like, oh, here's a scene from Huckleberry's perspective. And then to see that same scene from Jim's perspective, where he's just playing dumb to placate Huckleberry, was pretty fun. So Huckleberry Finn is amazing. Like, I really wish I would have read it in high school. It's such a good book, and in fact, it was so good that I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna read Tom Sawyer. You know, like I don't think we ever had to read that in high school. Okay, Tom Sawyer, amazing, A plus 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 plus. So it's all like everything suddenly made sense to me. Like, oh, okay. So Mark Twain puts out the most amazing book ever, Tom Sawyer. This book is so good. Like, you really have to read it. Like, it's playful, it's fun, there's drama, like it's tense. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer is amazing. Okay, so he puts out that book. It's amazing, right? He basically puts out, like, let's call it Star Wars. He puts out the best thing ever, the best media, best entertainment ever. Okay, everyone's hooked. And then he puts out the follow-up, you know, The Empire Strikes Back. Oh, it's Huck Finn. You're like, well, I'm definitely going to have to read this, right? Tom Sawyer was the best book ever. Well, obviously I'm going to read, you know, the sequel, Huck Finn. And then, so imagine back then, you're like, okay, I'm reading this. Like, what the heck? He's empathizing with the slave. He's humanizing a slave. Like, what's even happening? So Mark Twain, genius, good work. Okay, so those books, all good. Read those. Oh, and speaking of that whole switching perspective, I actually had that idea many, many, many years ago. There was a book way back when. It was popular, very popular among women. Actually, it was one of my female friends. She's like, oh my God, this book is so good, you gotta read it. It was called Something Borrowed by Emily Griffin. Fantastic, so good. Page turner, amazing. And then Emily Griffin put out a second book. So she puts out Something Borrowed, and then the second book. So in Something Borrowed, this girl, she ends up, so her best friend's engaged. She ends up kind of cheating and hooking up with her best friend's fiance, and she tries to justify it. So it's really fun. It's a really fun book. So the next book she puts out, Emily Griffin puts out, is, so after Something Borrowed, is Something Blue. So that book is a retelling of that story, but from the girl whose boyfriend cheated on her. So the best friend. Oh, did I mention that they're best friends? So now we get the best friend whose fiance cheated on her. So we get her perspective on what's happening, because she sort of demonizes this girl and she kind of justifies it to herself why she's gonna cheat on cheat with the fiance of her best friend. Playing spoiler. Something Borrowed, Something Blue. So Something Blue just switches perspectives, and there's a little overlap. So that's the fun part, the overlap. That's what I enjoy, is like, oh, here's all these situations that happened. Here's the other character's perspective on those situations. It's like, oh, totally different, you know, once you change perspectives. And then they go on into the other girl's life. Good book. And I was like, oh my gosh. So what I wanted to do, and I didn't motivate, I actually kind of started, I wrote a few pages. I'm like, okay, so there's 3 people involved. There is, what do we got? We got Rachel, Darcy, and Dex. So the first book is from Rachel's perspective. The second book is from Darcy's perspective. And then I'm like, oh my God, the third one should be from Dex's perspective. Dude, how cool would that be? The guy's perspective. You have these 2 girls saying this happened, that happened, and then the guy just be like, no, here's what happened. So I was going to call that one. So there's Something Borrowed, Something Blue, and I was going to write something. Like something. Yeah, you ever heard that expression? And I think I could probably write that with the help of like ChatGPT. I was talking to my buddy about it because I go over what I want to talk about with my buddy. He's like, yeah, keep that. That's good, not good. So he was like, as I brought this up, he's like, dude, with ChatGPT, we could crank that out in a weekend. I was like, oh, interesting. So maybe keep your eyes open for something. Maybe I'll come out with that. I just looked at the time. I've done 29 minutes already, and I'm just rambling. Let me see what else. I have a bunch. I'm only halfway through my list. This is crazy. Let's see what else I got. Hopefully it's still recording. Look at that. Oh, okay, we're almost. Okay, so with that. Okay, so so switching perspectives. Oh, the James book. Let's go back to James. That book, James with Huckleberry Finn. So the author of that book is I'm probably gonna mispronounce this. Percival Everett. Percival Everett. I've never heard that name before. The name Percival, but I think that's how it's spelled. Percival Everett. Okay, so you may have seen the movie. Please watch it if you haven't yet. It's amazing. It's awesome. It is called American Fiction. American Fiction, and that movie is based on the book he wrote. So the guy that wrote James, the one that's kind of a different perspective from Huckleberry Finn. So the guy that wrote James wrote a book called Erasure. I have not read that book, Erasure, but the movie American Fiction is based on Erasure. So the movie American Fiction is amazing. You got to watch it. It's sort of spoiler alert. So it's an African American writer, and he's trying to get his books, published and popular, and no one's really biting. And he's getting frustrated, and the publishers, like, why don't you kind of, basically play into the stereotypes of, being a black person in America. And he's just like, well, I don't want to do that. And then finally he gets frustrated, and he's like, okay, fine. So he just is like, I'm going to do something ridiculous. And he just writes what he considers just garbage, just totally playing into stereotypes. And lo and behold, it becomes a giant hit. The publisher, the agent, the publisher are all excited. And then, so now he's conflicted. He's like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, I was trying to write garbage, and yet that's what resonated with the people. Like, so great film. And then it's got some weird endings. You got to check that out. So American Fiction, definitely check that out. And if you enjoy that whole concept of sort of with the art, steering your art into sort of racial stereotypes just in order to become popular, if that concept is intriguing, there's a Spike Lee film called Bamboozled. So that one's pretty wild. You should check that out. So if you enjoy American Fiction and you enjoyed that and you enjoyed sort of the concepts of that, please check out Spike Lee's film Bamboozled. And I think I mentioned we're going to talk about American Psycho, so I guess we have to. So American Psycho has been coming up a lot on the internet. Like, people are really into it again. And apparently they're coming out with a film. So there was already a film, and they're gonna do another film. They're gonna redo it. I'm not sure how. So I listened to it. I read it, whatever you want to call that. And the original movie actually was pretty darn good. They did a great job of summarizing and sort of encapsulating all the themes and stuff in that book. But the book, if you do read it, apparently the critics really hated it, especially female critics. They called it completely misogynistic, and you can understand why. So in order to show how disenfranchised he was, how just he had no emotions, no feelings, he just didn't care about anything. He would just it was kind of like almost, it was like smut. I never read the Shades of Grey book, but imagine, just these detailed sort of sexual scenes, and then just extreme violence, like beyond just cutting off arms and legs. Like, it got graphic. Like, it was pretty wild. And then he probably used the C word about 1,000 times. So just heads up, if you are going to read that book, be prepared for how crass it is. And the whole point, he claims, of the crassness was to show just how disaffected he was with society, how there was nothing. He was just empty inside, and that's how he felt. The author, by the way, was Bret Easton Ellis. I watched a couple interviews on the internets, on the YouTubes. Just look it up. You can find some interviews with him. And he also, so his story is pretty cool. In college, he wrote a book, and it ended up getting published and becoming a hit. And that was Less Than Zero, which they ended up turning into a movie. So this Bret Easton Ellis guy apparently writes really well about rich people doing drugs and killing people. So Bret Easton Ellis. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out, there's this new movie coming out. It's going to be, let's see, I wrote down some notes. Oh, the guy who played Elvis, Austin Butler, he's going to play Patrick Bateman, the new lead role for the American Psycho. And I'm not sure what take they're going to have on it. I feel like the original film is perfect. I mean, maybe they make it more gory. I mean, that's the only thing I could see happening, because the movie took out a lot of gore. Like, most of the book is just, chopping up and torturing women. So maybe that's the take they're going to do. And then I can't remember the name. I didn't write down who the new screenwriter was, but the director is Luca Guadagnino, and he's known for something called Call Me By Your Name. Again, I don't know any of that, but I thought I'd share that with you. And also, I really didn't like in American Psycho, the book and the ending in the movie are the same in that it's an ambiguous ending. You're like, wait, did he actually really kill those people or not? Like, it's intentionally ambiguous. Like, was he just imagining all that? Or did he actually kill them all? We'll never know. So I really don't like endings like that. So there's certain type of endings that I'm not happy with. That one makes me particularly angry. In was it this or that? Like, no, don't do that to me. So there's the Sopranos ending where it just cuts to black. Like, they don't tell you what happens. Okay, I get why you do that. I'm not happy with that, but that's fine. But this whole, like, did this happen or did this not happen? Not cool. And then there's just a weirdo ending. So if you saw the movie Honora, at the very end, she ends up hooking up with the guy that was sort of security, kind of keeping an eye on her. But then she starts crying. I don't know. That was just a weird ending. Like I like a nice ending, like an end. I want things to end. So if you don't end them, then it's not an ending. It's just an annoying place where the film stopped. Okay. And that was me rambling for, oh my gosh, 37 minutes. Okay, well, I'm glad you listened to me ramble. Hopefully we recorded the whole time. And I know I said I was going to do this every week, and it's been 9 days. It took me 9 days to motivate. Hopefully I will motivate and put the next one up very soon. You're all great. Thanks for tuning in to Rex Time. Peace out.